You are listening to Browns Bites, except we're probably about to have a severe weather delay, so we got to wait, 90 minutes before we can get this thing going. And this is a big week for the Browns. In fact, as we are just turning on to record, they just walked off the field, what's left of them, from the first joint practice with the Eagles, which sounded pretty good from what I was reading on various tweets. Browns media pretty happy with what they saw. Eagles media pretty pessimistic from their side. So I'll take it. Because of the weather delay, I have multiple thoughts on this with Bree. Well, first, I think we're at the point now where, especially playing on Lake Erie, and especially the way weather trends are going, that not having a dome is becoming a competitive disadvantage for the Browns. Because in less than a calendar year, we've now 2 home games, and they don't play a ton of them, impacted by this. Obviously, the last year was that Saints game, which never had any business being played when they played it. And then now we have the severe weather. Everything suggests that's going to happen more frequently. So that becomes a negative. Whereas if, as myself and many other people pointed out on Friday, if the Browns had a dome, they would have started on time without issue, and no one would be worried about footing or anything else, or questioning whether the starter should go in or any of the other stuff. So that's part of it. The other part of that conversation is the thing I'm curious with from Bree's standpoint. Bree, you couldn't go to the game. You were out of town. Given how many people are involved, if you go, the distance you have to travel, and knowing the forecast ahead of time, would you have gone anyway? Or at the very least, or maybe just said, no, we're not bothering, or at the very least had to sort of think about whether or not it was worth going, because out of fear that you'd then potentially have to turn around and go right back home?
Yeah, that's a good question. And especially for someone that doesn't live in town. I actually had no idea that the weather was supposed to be that bad on Friday night. I thought it was actually supposed to hit us on Saturday, which it did. Yeah, that was definitely super inconvenient. And weather's always a factor in my decision. I can typically handle the cold, but dealing with storms and lightning and significant snowstorms isn't fun, especially when you were traveling. It was actually 3 years ago during COVID. My husband and I went to a game. It was actually against the Texans, Deshaun Watson, when it hailed, thunderstormed, rained, all within a matter of 1 hour. And that game was delayed as well. So I actually have experienced it firsthand. And although that was during COVID, there weren't a ton of people there anyway, but it was terrible. It's a terrible experience. You have to plan like you're dealing with the apocalypse and bring a million things. And especially as a season ticket holder, if there are situations where you can't attend a game, the resale value is terrible. So last December, I was actually out of town in Michigan. I couldn't give away my tickets. And it's not, being a season ticket member, regardless of where your seats are, it's an investment. So not having that luxury of being able to sell your tickets, even just at face value, it's not enticing to sign up for being a season ticket holder. Now, all that being said, they have a wait list, so it's not like they are lacking in terms of season ticket members, but it's frustrating. I have yet to sell a game that I can't go to at face value from what I paid for. And this is 4.5 years.
Well, the thing is, as you mentioned, it's expensive. It's not cheap. And then you have paid all this money, and then you have to sit there and think about, well, is my kid going to sit through 3 hours of this if it's awful? Or am I going to sit through it, or a spouse, whatever? At what point do you say to yourself, this doesn't apply to everybody, but what point are you saying to yourself, I'm just going to use that money to get the biggest TV I can get,
exactly,
watch it in HD. I mean, I get it when it was when tickets were $5 and it was that, or watch on grainy SD TV. Yeah, I get it. But it's not cheap. It's really expensive to go to this. And obviously preseason's a little bit different, but still they make you pay for those. They're not giving you a discount for it. So it's one more thing.
I felt bad too, Pete, because I had gifted my tickets to a father-son, and they sent me the sweetest message. And he said his son was super excited. I'm and then they deal with that. They had to wait an hour and a half at the stadium. You're dealing with a 7-year-old where game time's supposed to be at 7:30, and instead it kicks off closer to 9 p.m. I mean, that's a lot.
Sure. And obviously from the Browns standpoint, just as a team thing, they have to now think about, what are we going to do with players?
Yeah.
It seemed like the footing was too bad, but it's just more things to think about. So ultimately, if the Haslams foot the bill, they can do whatever they want. if
Slap
they
a dome on it.
But if they're going to say, hey, taxpayers, why don't you chip in? If it's me, and if I'm speaking on the behalf of the taxpayers, if they're not a dome on it, you can kick rocks at that point, because it's just a terrible investment to use the thing, a couple times a year.
Yeah, and not to mention, we'd be able to use it for concerts and different things all throughout the year. I mean, I feel like there's just way more benefits than not.
Yes. Now, you selfishly would sit there and go Taylor Swift concert.
Taylor Swift, Harry Styles.
But two people who are not hosting this podcast, I know a lot of them are immediately thinking WWE but whatever. I don't care.
That's fine.
The dream scenario to me is the Haslams pay the whole thing and they can make as much money off of those things as they want.
Exactly.
And we can move on, and that's great. But that's just my thought.
It's also great for the city itself. Yes. I mean, think about just what you said, Taylor Swift. I'm just going to say those cities that she was hosting her concert tours in benefited tremendously from an economy standpoint, because there were so many people traveling from afar, attending the concerts, staying for a weekend, attending multiple shows. And not to mention, she donated to all of the food banks and to every city she toured in. So again, I think it's good overall.
Yes. And the other event that you can potentially get in that scenario is the Final Four, which would also be a big deal. But anyway, we move on. The Browns, not long after, the day after we recorded last week, the Browns did what I've been prodding them to do forever, and they signed Shelby Harris, which is a big deal. All the people were sitting there freaking out about getting DeAndre Hopkins. My thing was, let's fix the D-line. They took their sweet time. I don't care. It got done. The Browns now have not one, but two starting caliber defensive tackles. I know that's a lot. Two. But
also
it's
what
a
we
big
need.
Deal. And he, obviously he was out there today. In fact, he was doing a press conference right as we were clicking record. You look at what they had. And we got a little taste of it against the Commanders. Myles Garrett didn't play, but you saw Zadarius Smith. You saw Ogbo Okoronkwo. You saw Dalvin Tomlinson. You saw a lot of these guys playing very fast. And now you've got another guy who's going to help them stop the run and get you into more of those situations. Hopefully, the goal is play the run well early and be able to rush the passer more often with no regard for anything else. If it's third and long, they got to pass. The Browns are in a sweet setup. In fact, looking through this as before we get recording, like the Eagles media was talking about how like they counted like what would have been at least 6 sacks, might have been 8 just from the Browns front in against a team that has Super Bowl aspirations. Now, how much do you really take away from that? I don't know, but it's certainly a good thing when you're talking about that level of competition. You're saying the Browns would have easily sacked the quarterback that many times. So Shelby Harris to me is a big deal, very credible inside, understands who he is and what he does. And I think he's going to be a huge part of this for the Browns and allow hopefully Dalvin Tomlinson to play in a role that's maximizes him to the fullest.
So when you first texted me today about our little bullet points for the show tonight and you put Shelby Harris on here, I completely forgot that this happened.
That's why I did that.
Like it feels like forever ago now because the whole preseason game was played and there's been a lot of talk just in regards to that I feel like this was just breezed over just based on the timing of it all. But and actually watching the preseason game and the defense specifically, and I know Myles wasn't out there, I was very, very excited to see just the intensity level that the defense brought overall and the defensive line. I think it was one of the first series that Obo got that pressure down the middle, like stopped the run immediately. I mean, these were
first play period.
Was the first play of the game. These were things that just weren't happening last year. And I also tweeted about this. We'll get to my other tweet later. Pete, I've been very critical of the defense specifically. I never felt like our defense was as physical as the other team, regardless of who they were playing. It always just felt like we kind of got bulldozed. And it felt like in this game, and I know it's preseason, I'm going to just take it with a grain of salt, but I do feel like there was a level of intensity, the physicality, the speed overall. It just looked and felt so different. Like the Browns were the enforcers on the field. And again, I know it's preseason. However, countless times I have watched our preseason teams jaunt out on the field and still look small in comparison and just like they couldn't. Pete, I guess the way to describe it, they looked crisp Chris.
The thing that stood out to me, they were fast. They were very fast.
Yeah, and I guess, with the defensive line being as bad as it was last year, outside of Myles Garrett, you could tell how much it benefited the linebackers, JOK specifically, in taking pressure off of them and their jobs by just having that pressure and the speed up front.
Everybody who is not Myles Garrett broke on the offensive line like water hitting rocks last year.
Yes.
Just was ineffectual, did practically nothing. Now they do stuff. And you saw the impact. Dalvin Tomlinson opening up a play for Juan Thornhill to make a play in the backfield because there was just that much pressure. You just saw an endless amount of pressure. Now the caveat to that, and the thing that I want to see how they address, is like, we talk about contain, and because the Browns have so much freedom up front and guys go inside and all this and create these running lanes, how are they going to address that? Seemingly the linebackers are going to be responsible for that secondary contain, to be able to clean up. So when the quarterback tries to scoot out like that somebody, particularly JOK, is going to be there to clean them up. But that sort of stood out, that the quarterback for the Commanders had one where he picked up a first down scrambling. Sam Howell picked up like 7 yards or whatever to extend a drive. And then later in the game, and obviously, this is not what I'm really worried about, but it just stood out, is when Jacoby Brissett was in there, he ran in the end zone, basically uncontested.
Yes. Yep.
So like that now becomes the next element. Like I said, I think what they will likely do is have the linebackers basically void the middle of the field, give up underneath stuff to clean that up. But like when you play Lamar Jackson, are you just going to continue to just be free flowing, or are you going to have very designed pass rush lanes because to avoid that exact scenario and deal with that? But
right, because it's not like Jacoby is quick.
No, he's just sort of I would describe him as lumbering.
Yeah. But Pete, to your point, those two situations that you described felt like what happened a lot last year, even without the defensive line upgrade that we got this year. So I can see that being frustrating. And to be fair, the Browns have played fairly well against Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, in the past.
Even under Joe Woods. So, we're going to have to face him twice. You have the Steelers as well in the division, and then Joe Burrow. I mean, the AFC North alone has pretty good competition for this defense to be able to have to handle and figure out. But yeah, again, Jim Schwartz did not look happy after that Jacoby Brissett.
No,
by the way,
he's pissed. No, like the flip side of that is like they did give up that Sam Howell scramble, and he threw for like 9 of 12 for like 77 yards, which isn't a ton of yardage. But at the same time, you got numerous penalties, and obviously one of them led to a safety. So like, yes, Sam Howell threw the ball relatively efficiently. He also had to work his ass off to do that because they're on you real fast. And that's, again, without Myles Garrett.
Yes, exactly. That's the thing for me is not only was last year frustrating because it felt like there were times we got no pressure on the quarterback, we also gave up those really annoying scrambles where the team would convert a third down, or these big, huge chunk plays. They all happened in the entirety of the game, like just consistently, like little dominoes falling, where a quarterback, regardless of who it was, could just carve out our defense, and or the run game, they would just bulldoze us down the entire field. Even with some of those plays that happened on Friday, I still found it encouraging that outside of the Jacoby touchdown, because that was a score, the little scramble that what's-his-face did, we then stopped the drive and they punted. So again, like, I know we're not going to be able to stop every single team on one drive and they punt, but felt like there were more encouraging things coming out of Friday than what we saw last year.
Yes. All in all, in some ways they're not showing everything. They do have some things to work on, but I was very struck at, again, the speed, physicality. They looked like a defense that's going to be much, much, much better. And once they get everybody ready and ready to go for week one, that should be pretty good. Meanwhile, the greatest 12 yards passing in NFL history from Deshaun Watson. Now, listen, I enjoyed the drive. I thought it was fine. My reaction to that was he looked comfortable in an ordinary drive. Like, and that has value, honestly. Like, I don't think it's Deshaun Watson is back, which I saw some people did, but he looked like you would expect him to look, or more so with how he played. And he ran well, and he looked in control. Like nothing surprised him on that drive. He didn't look sort of out of whack as he did so often last year. It looked as if everything went as they expected it to go, which is fine. But it was also 3 for 3 for 12 yards. So good. Certainly where we want to, certainly in the right direction. And I like some of the things they did. The other thing that jumped out to me is just how much empty they got into, which says a lot, especially against Washington's defensive front, with starters in there that had Chase Young. And I don't know if I saw Montez Sweat in there, but I know I saw their two in both Daron Payne and the dude from Alabama inside, who are both phenomenal players.
Yeah, so Montez Sweat, I think, stopped the 1 yard touchdown run. So
they had their dudes in there, and the Browns still felt comfortable to be in empty, which is an indication that they feel very good about, one, their protection enough, and then two, that Deshaun Watson's going to get the ball out of his hand quickly enough that it's not an issue. So that stuff was good. Elijah Moore was fantastic up until the point where I saw him headed to the locker room. Then I was dead. Then I found out, then we all found out that it was ribs and his X-ray is negative. So you're like, this sucks, but okay, we'll make it. So overall, I liked what I saw from that drive. I wish they would have punched it in instead of running that half-assed counter play and the goal line, which allowed the backside to pursuit to collapse it. But still, I felt good about what I saw up until the end.
Yes, agreed. Regarding the whole Deshaun thing, I guess my takeaway was very similar to yours. He did look much more comfortable and poised overall. I was happy, even though there was 12 yards of completion, that there weren't any throws that looked terribly overthrown wide in the dirt. I mean, because that's kind of what we got last year. They were on target. The receivers caught the ball. Fine. Looked like there was some chemistry there. He also scrambled quite a bit and made some plays with his legs, which I think we were probably all collectively holding our breaths on. I know I was. And
always in preseason.
Always. And especially knowing the field was wet and they had an hour and a half delay. So like that, to me, like I was worried about the field conditions. And then also just the fact that were they stretched? Was anyone going to pull a muscle? Like there's just a lot going on before the team came out. And quite frankly, I was happy to see him be done after they didn't score. Like it was just good to kind of see them off. Very excited about Elijah Moore. I'm definitely like already 100% in love with him. He has replaced my love of OBJ, even though I know OBJ had really no success in a Browns uniform. Elijah Moore, I am all in on.
Cowboys game. We'll always have the Cowboys.
Exactly. I will always have that game. And the one screen pass run against the Jets. Those will be my favorite OBJ moments. But yeah, Elijah Moore looked incredible. Obviously no Nick Chubb in this game. But I don't know, Pete. I feel like, I don't know that we can draw a ton of conclusions about Deshaun with this one series, but I feel a heck of a lot better about him than I did not seeing him at all and coming off of last year.
Sure. And the other thing, and I would say this carries over from what we've seen from practice is he's thrown the ball really well in the rain. Obviously, when he was playing in Houston, he was either south of the Mason-Dixon line outside or in domes. Mm-hmm. Like that was largely his thing. So I'm sure at some point he has played in rain. But to this point, he has done very well in the rain. Like one of their best practices offensively was a rainy practice where they apparently just picked apart the defense. So that is a good sign. And the fact that it never looked like he was messing with the ball or anything else, given the situation was good. That stuff is promising. I thought it was entertaining when Tony Grossi asked Kevin Stefanski if he was giving too much away by handing Elijah Moore the ball and having him run to the sideline, despite the fact that everybody has seen any number of clips of Elijah Moore doing stuff out of the backfield. But this is where we gave too much away. And I enjoyed Kevin Stefanski's reaction to basically almost caught himself almost laughing. But yeah, like there's just a lot of good stuff. And like, I know I've seen a million people get on one play of Jedrick Wills where he got beat and it didn't look very good and Deshaun Watson scrambled or whatever, but he also did pretty damn well a lot of those reps against Chase Young. So like, I get it. There are people who are out there looking to get Jed Wills at any point. But overall, and I think in some ways he's always going to be a little bit of a roller coaster. But all things considered, I thought he did a pretty good job with Chase Young, who is a finally healthy, legit talent that's going to give them problems. If that's an indication of what we can expect from Jed this year, I was pretty pleased with it, especially because Joe Bitonio didn't play. So he had Michael Dunn next to him at left guard. So that stuff doesn't bother me in the least. So overall, like, only so much you could take away from it, but I was pretty content with what we saw. Most importantly, the one injury we had was minor. There were some other injuries that we had in the game that weren't as minor. Bubba Bolden, safety, went out and was waived with an injury designation, so that isn't ideal. But for the most part, guys were day-to-day or listed as such.
Pete, I have a prediction.
Yeah.
There's going to be 3 villains this season. All right? Or maybe scapegoats, if you will. Jed Wills is definitely one of them. Kevin Stefanski, play calling, and Cade York. Those are going to be the 3 people that are going to have targets on their back all season long.
Well, the good news is, from what I can tell, based on Twitter and radio, the Browns are an absolutely dominating force, save for one spot, the kicker. Because Cade York missed another field goal in awful conditions and everything else, but he missed it, 46 yards. We could have a great season, but we won't because of the kicker. So now I have to worry about next year starting tomorrow, which I'm very bummed about because I was very excited for this season, but now I've lost that. That has been taken away from me. Here's all I can say about the kicker situation. Kevin Stefanski doesn't seem worried about it. Bubba Ventrone really likes him. They're pretty content to coach him up. At the very least, he's going to get until cutdown day. They don't have any interest seemingly in using a roster spot to bring in basically a kicker who has no shot. So when cutdown day happens, there will be a bunch of kickers available who get cut that could potentially be in the mix. If by that point the Browns still don't feel good about, or I should say, if they decide they don't feel good, because at this point they seem perfectly content with Cade York, despite the fact he's missed those field goals, then they can cut him theoretically, bring in like 4 or 5 guys at once, try them all out, and then pick a winner from there. The funny part is this exact scenario is also happening with the 49ers, who took a kicker in the 3rd round this year, who's also 0 for 2. And now they're all pissed off and they want Robbie Gould back. So it's another situation where not just us, though they have bigger fish to fry with their quarterback situation. The other thing that is now become appointment viewing is Dorian Thompson-Robinson. We have already gotten to the point where after Deshaun Watson came out, everybody's collective reaction is, all right, move along. Let's get to DTR. Let's just go. He's fun. Josh Dobbs is fine, but it doesn't look as good as DTR. So get him out. I'm done with him. Move on. And then when DTR leaves the game, it's like, there's this like, everybody's just forlorn at the idea that Keelan Mond's got to come in and play. And then there's also sort of this sort of worry of fans that they're thinking there has only 2 more games of DTR for this season. And there's like this preemptive sadness that they've only got so much left they can see of him, but he's very fun.
He's very fun. I actually was thinking that we were going to get another come from behind victory at the helm of DTR, but alas, we had to play our 4th quarterback, and that did not happen. Although I felt like Mond bounced back in a way from his game last week. Now, I will say that was a 4th quarter Kellen Mond versus a 1st quarter starting quarterback last week. So,
sure.
But I felt like he actually looked a little bit more composed and was able to get a drive down the field, and they scored a touchdown, and they could not convert on the 2-point conversion. But all in all, I felt like he did fine. But DTR, man, he really is really fun to watch. I was on Twitter earlier today, and I saw the clip of him faking the handoff and just how good of a ball fake that was for him. But yeah, there is a little bit of sadness in not seeing him again really after the preseason, just because he is electrifying. And I saw someone tweet, P, which I find so fascinating, that we signed Deshaun Watson in this monster contract, and we are obviously tied to him as our starting quarterback. And someone had said, of course, the year that we draft a quarterback that looks like they have potential to start on our team is when we are already tied to another one. And I will say, like, think we just need to calm down. How many times have the Browns drafted a quarterback and it has not gone the way that we have anticipated it going? So I'm fine. Let DTR develop. I hope that he lands a spot on this roster. I know that there's obviously a lot of things that need to happen because Josh Dobbs right now is the number 2, but he's fun and I'm going to enjoy it while we can.
I have a similar feeling with DTR. Just let him do what he's going to do. Don't worry about, well, he's got to be the backup now. Don't worry about what he's going to be long term. He's had 2 very good outings against middling competition. He's confident. He looks good, and you get to enjoy him. And that's the most fun part about some of these preseason guys is the fact that you get to just enjoy DTR, and you don't have to think about, well, what's he going to do on week 4? He just gets to go develop and hopefully be scout team look or whatever, depending on the week. But like Josh Dobbs is your backup. And the funny thing is like everybody had the exact same feelings about Josh Dobbs last year that they have about DTR now, but then he hasn't looked quite as good. And now we're all ready to be like, we're done with him. It's theoretically possible that the Browns, the only way Josh Dobbs is leaving this team is a trade. He's got a $500,000 signing bonus, which is whatever, but he's got a $1.5 million salary, which is all guaranteed. They're not going to cut him. They're not going to eat $2 million to move on from Josh Dobbs. So and I would say it's more likely that it would be near the trade deadline if it happens at all. But the thing is, like, Josh Dobbs is valuable to Deshaun Watson as a sounding board, extra set of eyes, and all those things. And then he's useful for DTR as a super professional, very smart mentor type. And then if we, hopefully we have 17 healthy games for Deshaun Watson and beyond. But if we don't, based on what we've seen, I'm more than happy to just let Josh Dobbs go in there and do what he's done. He's played real football games in the NFL. He did with no help on that Titans team last year and still looked okay being able to put them in position. So I was a proponent of DTR. I thought he was a guy who could be drafted day 2 based on everything that I saw of him, and just the talent, dual threat capability, and then the fact he played 48 games. These all added up to me like a guy you take earlier, especially when everybody's fawning over Brock Purdy because he was just a super experienced quarterback who came in and played well, that you would think, oh, well, DTR is that same formula. Somebody should take him. The Browns get him in round 5. Great. I'm not looking for DTR to be anything but third string until year 2. Josh Dobbs probably not going to be back after this year. At that point, DTR can step in and be that guy. For the moment, loving every minute I get watching him, but I don't need him to do anything for me other than just progress at his own pace.
Yes, 100%.
Other guys that keep standing, Austin Watkins Jr. keeps doing stuff. I don't know what's going to happen with him because you've obviously got Marquise Goodwin with his blood clot situation. I mean, nobody's saying anything. Like, I will assume he's not going to be ready for the season. Jalen Darden is another guy who stands out in that mix, but he's been hurt. I'm not talking about Anthony Schwartz anymore. I have moved on. I assume he will not be here. I assume he will be with the Rams or another one of these teams that's rebuilding.
But everyone, Pete, is just so mad about Schwartz and he's taking reps from someone else and all. Like, I had to laugh because the reactions from the game was like Anthony Schwartz kicking him when he's down, Cade York, like everyone like firestorm, and then Kevin Stefanski's play calling on the 1 yard line. Like those 3 things. And I'm like, geez, oh man, like, are we really doing this now? Like week 2, like this is what we're going to complain about. Like Anthony Schwartz probably isn't going to make this team. And then I tweeted about Cade York, and should we get into it? Should I say my piece?
Well, I was only going to ask, was one of those calls coming from inside the house? Because I heard that one particular fan that you may or may not be related to was in mid-season form.
My mother.
Yes.
My mother was yelling at the TV in the first quarter. There was no money on the line that I know because we were not in our hometown. There was no Family Dollar to place bets on. So there was no money on the line, still screaming and hollering. And it felt good. It felt like we were back. We were back, Pete. But no, we were actually not watching it together during the field goal miss because the delay really threw us off. I had to watch the third quarter on my phone with no sound next to my sleeping 7-year-old so that I wouldn't wake him up. And then I turned it off in the fourth quarter and had to watch that today. So again, I watched a very fragmented Browns game.
Fair enough. But yes, now you can, by all means, Cade York, hit it.
Okay. So I think sometimes Twitter is hard in terms of context and character limitations and whatever. And so when I tweeted what I tweeted, which was essentially how I felt like Cade York, everything was getting blown out of proportion a little bit because, and I think we talked about this last week, Pete. I just brought up the fact that we need to be focused on scoring touchdowns. And if Cade York missing field goals is a factor, then we have more problems. And so I honestly did not think that this would get as big of a reaction / response as it did. Like, I was honestly like blown away by how many people were so mad at me and quote tweeting me and responding and calling me an idiot and that I've only watched football for 6 months and really other stupid things that I try not to get myself worked up about. But all I was really trying to say, and I also realized that the people that were mad at me are actually not listening to this podcast. So I'm really talking to myself, but I just felt like I had to clarify a little
You're working through it. I get it.
I got to work through my own thoughts here. So really, to just elaborate on that, I went back and just looked at some facts just in general, because a lot of the like retorts that I was getting was Justin Tucker, number one, which
I don't think he's available.
He's not available. And also like, he's the best kicker that's out there. So to try to compare a second-year kicker to Justin Tucker, like, I don't know what you're trying to say there. Like, he's not Justin Tucker. He's never going to be Justin Tucker. Justin Tucker is a man of his own. Secondly, I was getting a lot of, well, even Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady like needed their field goal kickers. Like they won Super Bowls because of their field goal kickers. And well, yes, field goal kicking is important. I never said that it wasn't. I was not trying to imply that field goal kicking was not important, that we didn't need a field goal kicker. All I was trying to say, and I guess I need to do a better job elaborating next time, was that regardless of who our field goal kicker is, Deshaun Watson being the quarterback of this team should be the difference maker on this Browns team of taking this team from being mediocre to being elite. That is why the Browns paid this man $230 million. When you look at those other teams that were bailed out by their field goal kickers, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, they all had the elite quarterbacks to put them in position to win football games more often than not. And so, Pete, all I'm saying is that this team, going back and looking at 2022, and you can go beyond that, but just looking at 2022, I went back and just kind of pulled some stats around the Browns specifically. So just to level set everyone, the Browns ranked in the bottom half of the league in red zone offense. We couldn't score touchdowns. We also ranked in the bottom half of the league for third down conversions. Deshaun Watson should make us better at both of these things. When we are in the red zone, we should hopefully have an easier time scoring touchdowns, and we should hopefully be able to convert more third downs. I also went back and looked at the top teams in the NFL last year. None of them, I shouldn't say none of them, Baltimore was the exception here. Most of the teams that were ranked in the top 10 in the NFL ranked at the bottom of field goal attempts in a game. Okay, so I just like want to be clear here. The best teams in the NFL were scoring touchdowns, Pete.
Indeed.
I also went back and looked at point differentials. The top 6 teams in the NFL, actually, let me just validate that for a minute. Got my stats here. The top 6 teams in the NFL had a point differential higher than a touchdown. Cincinnati, Kansas City, Dallas, Buffalo, San Francisco, and Philadelphia all had a point differential of greater than a touchdown. So in more cases than not, they were winning by a touchdown or more, not a field goal. Everyone was saying so many games in the NFL are determined by less than 3 points and a field goal. And I get that. I get that when you start going to the mid to bottom of the NFL, the spread is not that big. In fact, like there are a lot of teams that rank right in that 3, 2, 1, negative, those thresholds. I'm just saying All I was trying to say was if Deshaun Watson is what we think he is taking our team from middle of the road average to elite so that we can be in the conversation with these teams of scoring more touchdowns, beating teams by more than 3 points, holding on to a lead, keeping the lead, and doing what we should be doing and not having to rely on a field goal kicker to win football games. One last thing, Pete. I am not naive to say that there will not be a moment in time where this team is down and we get the ball back and we need our quarterback to drive down the field because there's only under a minute left to go. And that's all the time we have to do is to get to the 30-yard line to kick a field goal. That's going to happen. It happens time and time again. As a Browns fan, we are so used to being in that situation and either turning the ball over or barely making it down the field to kick a field goal and having our field goal kicker miss it. Again, I will be happy to have a quarterback that can actually march us down the field to score one way or the other. But time and time again, these elite teams are looking to score touchdowns, not field goals. That is all. I don't know. Did I elaborate? I probably still did a bad job trying to elaborate.
No, and to further your point, like you get into Patrick Mahomes like stats or whatever, he's like their games are never close. But historically, in a 16-game schedule, if your team scores 400 points, you're locked to make the playoffs, which works out to 25 points a game. So if you are in a 17-game schedule, that becomes 425 points. How many points did the Browns score in 2020 when they made the playoffs?
I don't know.
Well over 400 points. It's the most they've scored since the goddamn 60s.
How do you score points, Pete?
Score touchdowns. Now.
Okay, wait, I have one last fact to share because I forgot about this one. So again, Baltimore is the exception here, which if you look at 2022, it makes sense because I feel like Lamar Jackson was injured. The teams that scored, okay, hang on. I got to go back to the stat. I got to get this right. I'm already failing at this. So these are field goals made per game. The top 10 teams that ranked 2.1 to 1.8 field goals per game were not the best teams in the NFL. Baltimore ranked number 1 at 2.1. Again, makes sense just based on kind of how their season went last year. Mm-hmm. But like Pittsburgh, Las Vegas, Seattle, Carolina, like these are teams that made a lot of field goals last year that didn't mean shit. That's what I'm saying.
Correct. Now, let's go to last year. 425 points being the benchmark. Buffalo Bills, 455 points. They were 13-3. Kansas City Chiefs, 496 points, 14-3. The Philadelphia Eagles, 477 points, 14-3. The Dallas Cowboys, 467 points, 12-5. Detroit.
And Detroit is wild in all of these stats, to be honest with you. I was shocked. I forgot.
Detroit is, man, they actually broke the trend. 453 points, and they didn't make the playoffs going 9-8 because Dan Campbell's a terrible, terrible coach in clutch situations. San Francisco 49ers, 450 points, 13-4. So the best way to get more points is to score touchdowns. So if the Browns are just looking at this, you are trying to amass points, average 25 points a game. The other part of this whole thing is like,
wait, can I pause? Can I pause there for a minute, Pete? Because I think like the formula of all of this is that these teams, for the most part, I feel like Detroit's puzzling, to be honest.
They only had a plus 26 point differential, which is horrendous.
But what sets these teams apart for the most part is they have a really good quarterback at the helm that is able to be able to march down the field and score. I mean, they make it look easy. So like, that's the formula that we need is we need to score touchdowns. I also pulled just field goal conversion percentage of 2022. Do you know who the best team was in terms of converting field goals?
Last
year? What would you say? Yeah.
Might be the Rams kicker, Matt Gay.
He was they were number 3.
Oh, wait a minute. Was it Zane Gonzalez?
Carolina Panthers.
Like 90%?
Carolina.
Yes,
94.3% in field goal conversions. And then Houston. Who's Houston's kicker? I forget.
I will check for you, but I know Zane Gonzalez was dynamite last year and we dumped him unceremoniously.
So, so Pete, Cincinnati's 19. I know everyone keeps bringing up Cincinnati and
Evan McPherson,
the
kicker.
And then what's his face? Justin Tucker was 86.3.
He had a down year. He had a down year for Justin Tucker.
I everyone's just spewing these things at me. And I'm like, if you actually go back and look at it, the teams that had the highest conversions on field goals last year, again, they were shit teams outside of the Rams. And Dallas was up here, number 8. Go argue with a wall. I don't know. Like, I don't know what people want me to say, but I'm not wrong. And I guarantee you there's people bookmarking that tweet to essentially prove to me how wrong I am anytime Cade York misses a field goal when it matters the most.
Yes. Unless it's like at the end of a half or the end of a game where you're driving down the field. For example, Carolina last year when Cade York went from 58 or whatever. Every other time you settle for a field goal, I can only speak for myself. It's failure. You failed. That is your mindset when the kicker comes out. You failed to get a touchdown, and now you have to trot the kid out because you want to settle for 3 points. No one's sitting there going, yeah, we didn't get 7, but we got 3. Awesome. Like, that's part of it. Like, that's the mindset. And I like the fact that Kevin Stefanski's so aggressive on 4th down. I only need the kicker in those situations. Yes, you're ultimately going to have make kicks, and certainly they matter. But ultimately, I'm more than happy to let the collective Twitter sphere, radio people, and everybody else all focus on the kicker. I will worry about everything else on the football team that actually matters, namely scoring points, scoring touchdowns, and stopping the other team. If you do those 2 things, you're going to win. I'm not worried about kicker. But the other part of that is the Browns hired Bubba Ventrone. I'm going to let him figure it out.
I also had someone say to me that, so I find this interesting, and I want to hear your perspective on this. I won't name names. I mean, I can't keep track of everyone that was attacking me. But so first point was, I had someone say to me that keeping Cade York on this team and having him not be reliable or consistent is going to be, it's a failure because this is our year and it's a win now year. And essentially, if this happens, like, it's over for us. And I sat there and I was like, is Deshaun Watson like not under contract? Like, I'm sorry, is this like a LeBron situation where we know that he's going to leave to go to LA and like, this is it for us? We have to trade the farm in order to have a shot in hell to win. I'm like, that's the lengths that we're going here. And then someone else also said that Bubba Ventrone has nothing to do with the kicker.
Wow, that would be news to him.
So that was
my favorite is still the person who said
prominent person.
You decided that you were trying to take the blame away from Cade York and put it on Deshaun Watson as a way to sabotage him.
Yes, correct.
Hold him entirely responsible for the fate of the team, even though Deshaun Watson is saying straight up, the offense will go as I go.
Yes, that was also the twisting of my words and thoughts. And I had to mute the thread. I can't go back through it again. And I own my tweets. I typically do not delete things that I put out there, regardless of how bad my takes are. I say bad in quotations because I also put out a facetious tweet out after of how terrible my take was. And then people were like, just say you're sorry, like, way to own up to it. It was just, I was like, no, I'm not. There are people that have full-time jobs in the town of Cleveland solely based on bad takes, and people in Cleveland that have jobs that have 0 things to offer. And I will not name names, but I know that for a fact. So anyway, Pete, that's just a little.
Some of them produce videos with the team. Anyway, enough to talk about Cade York. Like I said, I just don't care. You and I, who both love spreadsheets in terms of like data and everything else.
Yeah.
Focus on the big picture. Get as many points as you can get. Hold the other teams to as few points as you can. And if it's really high points for and low points against, you're probably doing pretty good. Now, the joint practices with the Eagles. This is the biggest deal of preseason, and the team may not admit it, but it's absolutely starred. This is the thing, because 1, the Eagles are good. 2, you are putting your dudes out there. And 3, these teams are familiar enough with each other. They're not hiding stuff from each other. They're not going, well, we're not going to use our real plays. That's part of the reason they do these joint practices is because it doesn't get out to everybody else. You're going to go hard and try to get better based on what you do. And day 2 is probably going to be more fierce than day 1 was, because there's a little familiarity. And now teams are guys are sick of each other already. don't like each other. And then two, they've had a day to sort of rep, see what's up. And then like now they're going back to work on things and try to exploit these things. So this is the big deal. Your preseason record is whatever, unless you're the Baltimore Ravens and you manipulate your quarterback order specifically to try to win your 24th preseason game in a row, even though you haven't won a playoff, you've won the same number of playoff games as the Browns have since 2014. This is a huge deal. Obviously, during the season, there will be measuring stick games. Like the one that stands out to me right now is the 49ers off the bye week. But like, this is a big measuring stick. You've done all this camp, OTAs and everything else. So this is the first time you're getting a real sense of how good are you relative to another very capable team. And even though I have some sense of how the first day went, I would have said this anyway. Like, this is a big deal for this team. Both teams care about this quite a bit, and they're trying to get better. They are trying to prove something here, because after this, they play Thursday, and then it's like a little over 2 weeks or a little over 3 weeks until the season starts. So this is like that big point, and it matters. I'll be very curious to see how players and coaches feel coming off this week and how they talk and how they address press conferences, because I think you will get a sense of how they feel about the team relative to how this week went and positioning themselves to have what they hope is a strong start to the season. So, and even just watching the coverage, like you're getting a play-by-play from a lot of Twitter accounts who are reporters who are there, which is awesome because they get it too. They understand how important this is. It's a competition against another team. I don't know if you saw a single clip, because that's the thing. They like make this very,
No.
They do. You're not getting anything out of this for that exact reason. They don't want to let anything out. They make it very tight security in terms of that stuff. So you get to see stuff, but you don't get to record stuff. So it's a good situation. Obviously, the best thing for the Browns is to come out healthy. They've had some guys go leave this, but then like one of them might be a bigger deal, but the other two seem minor, which are Ward and Garrett seem like to be nothing. But overall, big deal. It's worth paying attention to this and reading takeaways and trying to get a sense of how they feel. So I think it's worthwhile to pay attention to that.
Pete. So no, I did not see any news coming out of today, but I do have to correct you because Carolina's kicker was not Zane. It was Eddie Pinheiro.
Oh,
Zane got injured.
Pinheiro.
Yeah. So sorry, just to clarify. But again, best kickers in the NFL, you don't even know their names. You don't even
That's the other
know
part.
whose team
Like,
they're playing for.
I have to look it up. Like, who's the Eagles kicker?
He was actually pretty good.
I'm sure he's fine, but like he's not the guy that jumps out. Jake
You have
Elliott.
no idea. Jake Elliott. Yeah. I was gonna say
I'm sure he's fine, but you know how many field goals he kicked? 20. They scored 51 point. He kicked 51 PATs. That's about where I want to be. I want to be at 51 PATs by the end of the year. 20 field goals is fine. That's barely one per game. Perfect. That's exactly where I want to be. 20 field goals, 51 PATs. That's the good stuff. So yeah, by virtue of the fact that the Browns and Eagles are going to go pretty hard at these joint practices, the Browns have already said flat out, no one who's a starter is going to play in the preseason game. I also wouldn't expect them to play anyone in their final preseason game of starter. So what we got against Washington is sort of it. And then it just becomes the rest of the other practice with the Eagles tomorrow before the Browns are really just honing in on getting ready for the season. I think a large part of that is getting healthy for the season. It sounds like Greg Newsom's pretty close to being back from his groin injury. Certainly good news. And Elijah Moore did not participate in practice today. I doubt he will participate tomorrow either. But nevertheless, after this one, get healthy, get ready for the season, start worrying about that, start worrying about the Bengals. But the thing that also, even though it's like 4 weeks from yesterday, we're recording this on a Monday, 4 weeks from yesterday's the start of the season, week 1, for the Browns, it does feel like it's going very, very fast and that we're going to be there before you know it.
I can't wait, Pete. My excitement meter is growing.
Look at you. Look, look who's lost contain on her emotions.
I cannot be controlled.
Do us a favor. Do the things like the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel. That certainly helps us out. Doesn't cost you anything. Tell a friend, all those good things to keep us going. Beyond that, we will be back next week, which will probably feel like an eternity, especially if the Browns sign another player and we'll almost forget them. But the rest of these practices, we'll have more to talk about with that, another preseason game, and then we're one more closer to getting to where football matters. So we're almost there.